Welcome to this week's episode of The Catholic Gentleman. If you listened to last week, then you know that we had three more equally important points to discuss regarding what women do not understand about men. I'll drop that previous episode in the show notes. We have received great responses to last week's episode, with even one gentleman saying that listening to this needs to be a required step in marriage prep. We are grateful that God has been able to use us to bring clarity to these differences. And just like last week, instead of releasing only a portion of the episode to the public and the extended version to our CG Plus members, we're going to release the entire episode this week publicly. Thank you everyone for your prayers and your support. We hope you get a lot out of this episode. Merry Christmas. It is my job to redirect that authentically in love, and that's been my call. But it took me years to realize that, like, she's not going to just see herself like I see her, that I have to work to help her appreciate and love herself the way I see her and the way I love her. And in that, in that dance and in that love, it's just it's what the fullness of marriage can be. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Catholic Gentleman. We are so blessed that you have decided to join us. We are your hosts. I'm John Heinen. We've got Sam Guzman and we've got Devin here to dialogue about what women don't understand about men. If you didn't hear our last episode last week, we had a really great time diving into two topics, but we have three more that we want to talk about and cover today. In addition, we get to talk to one of our listeners who sent us a great question about being selfish around his wife and how to avoid that, and some tips that we can give him to grow in that relationship and avoid selfishness, something that we've all dealt with ourselves. And so here we are in the first week of Christmas. I hope you guys are all having a blessed Christmas season and just a joyous new year. We will be also taking off next week. So there's going to be a rerun. So if you're listening to this, we'll be taking off next week. Finally, I want to thank all Catholic Gentlemen Plus. We launched that membership in June. We are so blessed for all of you who have decided to join us. And we've just been getting tons of positive responses. Every single week, we come out with an extended edition of this episode on Catholic Gentlemen Plus. We have new sessions and new themes. Next month, we're talking about outward appearance. This month, we talked about humility. And again, we're just so grateful for you guys. And I just want you to know that every single one of you are in our prayers and in our monthly mass that's offered up for your intentions. We just really appreciate your support, and hopefully you're gaining a lot out of that. So, okay, diving back into this topic here about what women don't understand about men, we have the next one, which kind of nicely relates to, if you listen to last week's episode about men desiring respect, and that one is on how men handle insecurity and stress, which is very different than how women handle it. And it's something that we need to be aware of, but even more importantly, we also need to be aware of how women are receiving this from us, right? So because of life being a relationship, and life being a relationship of those that God has put in our path, our wives, our daughters, or even our mother and close friends, we have to understand this aspect of the relationship, is that men see the world, men engage the world in a way very different than women. And that women are also receiving from us that messaging that we're putting forth. So we want to talk about how men deal with insecurities and stress. And I kind of see this in a couple different ways, from an external, how we experience that and relate that to others, as well as internally. So Sam, I want to turn to you as a man who has had a lot of insecurity. No, I'm joking. Who's a mental health counselor extraordinaire, who's been counseled men and women through this. And I want to get your thoughts right out the gate of the uniqueness of men and how we approach this.
Yeah, I think one of the fundamental ways human beings in general avoid pain is through avoidance, numbing. And men and women both do this. Like, we just don't want to suffer. So we find ways of coping with it. And of course, it can look very differently based on which sex you happen to be. Women have their own ways of coping. But for men, I would say specifically, there's a few things. One is anger, and we did a whole episode on this previously, where it's like when men feel threatened, and stress is really a threat response, right? Like you're feeling threatened by your job, by your finances, by your coworkers. Maybe you've got a difficult boss, but also maybe at home, like it just feels overwhelming. Like there's just too much going on. You're just uh, really feeling under the gun, and different ways of handling that. Yeah, anger is a big one. Again, men channel all of their energy. It's like when you detect a threat as a man, your natural response is to go to war against it. With those fight, flight, or freeze responses, this is not a hard and fast rule, but I would say generally speaking, men default more towards fight. Like we want to channel our energy into combat. And so we go to war against the problem or whatever. And that often manifests as anger, irritability, impatience, and obviously this hurts people around us. And then they start responding in their own defensive ways. Like maybe your wife detects that. And maybe she wants to try to fix it, but you push her away. And then she starts getting mad too. And that just makes the spiral worse and worse. But anger is a big one. The other big one is addictive behavior. Alcohol. Huge. Americans have a hugely unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And I can't speak to other countries. I think there's a longer tradition of alcohol use and maybe some more moderation there. But maybe I'm just deluding myself. I don't know. But at least in America, I know that a ton of Americans struggle with alcohol use. And just hit the liquor store as soon as they feel that stress coming on, and use that to numb out and control their emotions. And of course we know, masturbation, pornography, like these are often pressure release valves for men where it's like, oh, I'm feeling it, but I don't want to be feeling it. The stress has got to be diffused somehow. And so you turn into that addictive behavior. But of course that also has ripple effects on yourself, but in the relationships around you, and ends up eroding that. So the fundamental response is usually numbing of some kind. The last one I'll throw out there, and we'll get to this one later, but is workaholism. Just withdrawing yourself into a domain where you feel safe and in control, which is often the workplace for men, where it's like, well, I know what's expected of me here. Like home, I don't know what to do with all these emotions. I don't know what to do with kids crying or my wife, complaining about this or that. So I'm just going to withdraw into work because at least I know what to do there. I know how to execute. I know how to perform. When I come home and all this like emotional craziness, like I can't deal with that. So I think those three responses are very common. There's others, but I think that's how a lot of times men handle stress.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I like this idea of coping. I think you're exactly right, because when we experience stress, we're looking for a way to alleviate that. I also want to say that because of the nature of man, we're not overly vulnerable, right? So I think we interiorize a lot of stress that we experience, right? Or insecurities, for instance, and in particular, insecurities, that lack of confidence. Men aren't voicing these things because we don't want to give opportunity for us to be disrespected. We see that as a failing of ourselves. And we know here at the Catholic Gentleman that is, based in pride. But I think it's important to understand exactly our natural responses, maybe our base instincts, if you will, that we have to rise above, that you're bringing up here, because within those coping mechanisms, they take a different area than women do. And I think a lot of that is because we're interiorizing it and we're not knowing how to deal with it. We want to have control over these situations. We are fearful of supporting for our family, or fearful of our future, or the status or reputation, or all these different things. And we push it deep down inside, right? And there's that sort of approach for man that is different than women, that I think is something that we have to bring to light and we have to be aware of. And then turning to God's grace and turning to virtue and turning to these things to help us better understand, and communication with others to help us understand these and become something greater than we can do on ourselves, and see these opportunities as they present themselves for lessening ourselves and increasing Christ. Now, I know I went to a spiritual direction there, but I would love to hear your thoughts, Devin, when it relates to stress and insecurity.
Yeah, I think we need to just be real here and say that all men wrestle with insecurity. And there's enough statistical data regarding this to prove this hands down. And so, regardless of how confident or how bold and emboldened a man is, or how put together he is, sometimes that's actually the sign that he really wrestles with insecurity and a lack of confidence. That's no condemnation on him. I just want to level the playing field here and say that's the starting point. We all suffer from this. And where we encounter our lack of security, if you will, in ourselves, our lack of confidence usually is in the competitive workplace. It's usually where we're doing battle. That's where we will encounter it more head on. And that's where we have more of a opportunity, if you will, to encounter our own personal failings. With that said, if we're married, we tend to bring that back into the home. Now, here's what happens with a man who's wrestling with insecurity. And I can speak to this because I've had many experiences with this in my own life. But basically, there's like 4 C's. 2 of them involve kind of like shutting down. 2 of them involve outbursts. Okay. So there's going to be, depending on the personality type, it can go one of 2 ways. It can go your stress and lack of confidence can be externalized, or it can be greatly internalized. Like I think you were saying, we got to hide this from everyone else. We don't want anyone to know. Or like George Bailey, like we talked about, I want everyone to feel my pain. So basically the internal reaction to our own insecurity is to console and to control. We want to, like Sam was saying, we want to numb the pain, whether it's pornography, alcohol, just distracting ourselves from our responsibilities. So we want to console ourselves, like, adult thumb sucking, or we want to control. We start to over control situations. Now, here's where we get inside the male mind here. Why is the male mind so different? Because the male mind wants a solution. The female mind loves the relationship and can work in a sense of that unknowing and be able to talk about it and emotionally kind of vent at times and work through it. Whereas a man is like, how do I get to the solution on this? And that's where we're looking to the consolation, or we're looking to the control, and we're saying, how can I fix this? Then on the other side, the external side, is that we either complain or we criticize. Those are the other 2 C's. So we complain we voice our complaints, we criticize, and we might just kind of blame everyone else except for ourselves. And then oftentimes this can come into complaining and criticizing our spouse, our wives, our children, the coworkers, because it's obviously never our fault, but because that would feed more into our insecurity and our lack of confidence. So the male brain wants a solution, and he feels like these 4 things, whether it's console, control, complain, criticize, those things somehow are going to help him to arrive at that solution. Now, women, what you need to know is that you can't solve your husband's problem for him. And this is another thing, don't try. Yeah. Because that's where the combativeness can occur. Yes, come alongside of him and walk with him through that. But the moment that you try to take control of that situation and tell him what to do, then he's going to feel even more insecure and inferior, and he could lash out, or he could just completely shut down and flee. So that's kind of like my 30,000-foot view on the whole reaction to our own insecurity, lack of confidence, and how we encounter it and then how we combat it.
Yeah, and I just want to throw out one more thought here real quick. Another way that we can cope that can be unique to Catholic men is like doubling down on legalism and like religious rigidity.
Yes.
Where it's like, all right, we're going to come home, like, here are the rules, and like, wife, you're going to do this, and kids, you're going to do this, and like, I'm going to do a 90-day novena, or like, whatever. It's just like, control. And
that's right. Control.
And you're trying to control and micromanage. It has nothing to do with the relationship with Christ. It has nothing to do with, the angels or saints or the Blessed Mother or anything. It's literally just about mood alteration, which is what I would say is like the root of a lot of coping mechanisms is like, how can I feel better fast?
Yes.
And whatever will do it quickly for you is what you turn to. And religion is a perfect opportunity for this, because what could be wrong about like saying more prayers and like, telling your family, like, this is what we're going to do. And like, I'm going to fast, 3 times a week and like eat only fish and like, all these religious practices. What could be so bad about that? Right. But at root, it's still being driven by fear and insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe it's less bad than going and getting blackout drunk, but it's still like something that we're turning to boost that mood as quickly as possible.
I love that. And the reason why it's so devastational is because we're actually doing the very opposite thing that the Lord wants us to do in that circumstance. We're trying to control, where he's saying, I want you to be receptive to the circumstances that are going to shape you. Allow me to use these circumstances to shape you into a real man, which is going to demand your faith and trust in this time of stress, where you feel like a failure, where you feel unsuccessful, or whatever it is. And so the Lord wants to use these circumstances to shape us. However, we don't want that. We reject that, and we're like, I'm going to shape my circumstances. And all the self-help people will tell you that's what you're supposed to do. But that's how huge mistakes are made, because it's not a response, it's a reaction. It's not a response to God and his invitation. It's a reaction to our circumstances. And then we start to take control, and we lay blows on people. Boom, 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 trying to take that control.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Sam. And I was fortunately able to find it right away, that this is the teaching of the Doctor of Moral Theology, St. Alphonsus. If you haven't read Uniformity with God's Will, you should. But he said right at the beginning, mortifications, meditations, receiving Holy Communion, acts of fraternal charity are all certainly pleasing to God, but only when they are in accordance with his will. When they do not accord with God's will, he not only finds no pleasure in them, but he even rejects them utterly and punishes them. And so he goes as far to say that if we are heaping these burdens on others and we are looking to control that situation, we could be doing something very contrary, sinning, honestly, very contrary within the will of God. So that's something for us to be aware of. I really appreciate you mentioning that. One question that I wanted to talk about was briefly, like, as it presents itself to other people externally, do you find that perhaps the root cause of pride or maybe even lying that men do to try and make themselves look bigger can all be a result of this stress or these insecurities that they're dealing with?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And
I mean, posing and posturing, and we're constantly trying to make ourselves bigger than we actually are.
Yeah.
And I think this is the problem. Identity is everything. Become who you are, and you will set the world on fire. And I think that there's a problem when we're trying. There's two. So the man who is truly a man of God, he doesn't try to be more than he is, nor does he feel less than he is, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So this is the sin of our times, is that we're aspiring to be more than we really are and think that we're deserving of that, or we think of ourselves less than we are, less than God thinks of us, rather than being rooted in our true identity and knowing our place.
I do want to emphasize that not all coping strategies are unhealthy. Not all of them have negative consequences. And so I would encourage you, if you're listening to this, like, think about healthy ways that you can manage stress and insecurity. And one of those ways really is talking about it. Now, I'm not saying you have to go see a counselor, a therapist, but just talk to a friend, like get together with a friend and just like, man, like I am just under so much pressure right now. And what you find is often just verbalizing those things, externalizing them a bit, makes them a little more manageable, a little less overwhelming. And having someone hear you, affirm you, and it's like, oh my goodness, I can't imagine how hard that is. Like just something as simple as that can really make a difference in your stress levels. So like reach out and connect with another man, go get a beer together, whatever, and just talk it out. And that can really be helpful. And men have actually done that for centuries. Because of the social bonds breaking down in the modern world, we have less opportunities for that. But that just means we have to be more intentional about it. The other thing I would say is just pay attention to your physical organism. Like, go work out, like burn off some of that cortisol, burn off some of that adrenaline, like work it out, at the gym or whatever you got to do. Go for a run or something, but pay attention to your physical body. How's your diet? How's your sleep? Like, what changes do you need to make sure that your physical being is resilient enough to deal with whatever stress you're under and whatever pressure you're under? And there's dozens of other opportunities, but just pay attention to like what helps you feel good that doesn't have negative consequences. And those things are okay. Like, we all need those healthy coping mechanisms. So just take some time and like maybe think through some ways, some strategies that you can release that stress in a way that doesn't hurt you or anyone else.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, Sam. And I think it's so important because we are required to take care of this temple, but it actually has those ripple effects for our lives, our security, our confidence, as well as the relationships of those around us. And so other people benefit when you look for those positive coping mechanisms, or at least mechanisms that can lessen your stress, maybe a different way of saying the same thing. I think that's great. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, Devin, please. No.
Just a little word of warning, though, perhaps, is that I think as men, we have to be careful not to put too much pressure on women to give us that security that we desire.
Mhm.
Only God can really ultimately do that. And a lot of times insecure men, what they will do is they will place an exceedingly large burden, emotional burden on the woman in their life to feed them and make them confident. And when that doesn't happen, that's when arguments and, all sorts of dysfunction occurs in the relationship. So it's very important not to hang a hat on a hook that can't bear the weight, and not to look to woman to somehow heal you of your insecurity. This is where prayer life is so essential, and spending time with the Lord and actually getting to know him and become like him. So just a word of warning there.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Well, I think it's a perfect time now for us to switch to our next topic, and one that we are all going to tread lightly, or maybe not, and dialogue about. But the next topic that we want to discuss is what women don't understand about men is that men want their wives to be beautiful, or a beautiful woman. And I'm just going to start by saying that this is very toxic in our environment today, both for men and for women, with this idea of body image. But there is something very true to this that we need to dialogue about. The men are motivated by the feminine body and by the female beauty, and we can go all the way back to Greek mythology and Andromeda. And I find it very fascinating that Andromeda was not only, she was a princess, right, but she was also strapped, tied up naked, right, for the sea monster to devour her and stuff like that. So there was this juxtaposition between, or this tension between, chaos and the form and beauty and order that is a woman. And then you can look to the story of Saint George, right, and the famous story of him, killing he rescued a damsel in distress, right, who was another princess, right? There's something unique there. We look at the modern Disney stories from Sleeping Beauty and Beauty and the Beast, and all of these different things have the hero's journey, or a portion of it. They have this element of man's desire to experience and to be with the beautiful. And I finally just want to turn this in. Again, just going to the kind of the ontological reality of this is that when we look at Adam in the garden, and I think this is so important,
Yes.
Adam had every single thing he could possibly have wanted. He wanted bacon, boom, it was there. He wanted every good. He could see and visually see every beauty that God had put for him, but he was restless. He still was not complete. And when Eve was created, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, he experienced a joy in her beauty, in her fullness, and in his completion within his relationship with Eve, right? That is better in the image of God, is more like the image of God in a way that he never was able to experience on his own with all of the goodness and fruits of the earth. And I think that that is so important and so poignant for us to be aware of, because this story recurs. And regardless of what the feminist movement is going to say, and regardless of what maybe men who have abused this in women's lives have done to these women, right? There is an essential component of man that still sees woman as the epitome or the climax or the pinnacle of beauty in the world. And so within that, we have to, in a way, separate ourselves from this ideal to the reality, but nevertheless, our wives still are the closest relation and the closest example, if you will, of that feminine that motivates the hearts and minds of men. And then one thing that I already told them in show prep, but I'm going to tell our listeners, I actually sat down with my wife for 30 minutes last night to dialogue about this subject before jumping on this, because I know how delicate this can be. And we certainly don't want to put on burdens or unnecessary expectations on women or from men, but we're talking to men here. And there is a truth written in the hearts of men that we can't ignore, and that we have to dialogue about this. So, Devin, I want to shift to you and get your thoughts and dimensions of this reality as it is experienced in the hearts of men today.
Yeah, first I commend you. Everything you said, I just wholeheartedly agree with and love. It's very, very good. I do think that men are often accused of being shallow for wanting a woman who's beautiful, or wanting their wives to be beautiful. Oh, all he wants is sex. All he wants is a good-looking woman. And we have to remember, like you were saying in the creation account, the first thing Eve saw, not Adam, when Eve was created, the first thing Eve saw was a man rejoicing in her, looking at her, rejoicing in her, and he couldn't rejoice in her soul without seeing her naked body. And this isn't perverted, this isn't disordered, this is pure. They know, as Pope John Paul II said, they know and saw each other with all the peace of the interior gaze. So they were able to look at one another without distrust, in a disinterested way, without objectification. But let's just put it this way, this is an authentic need for a man. God created man with a deep sexual attraction toward the feminine body, like you said. This is God's design. Okay, so sexual attraction, sensory bodily attraction, like JP2, John Paul II said, is reflexive, and it constitutes the raw materials. That is the invitation to love through sexual attraction. So we men were extremely visual, okay, and women know this because they dressed for men at some level, okay, and Adam does recognize, Eve's beauty, and the lover in the Song of Songs, when he speaks of the beloved, he just doesn't talk about her soul. He speaks of her thighs, her hip joints, her navel, her breasts. Often he talks about her breasts, often. So, and why? And this is very important that both men and women understand. What is our fascination with beauty? When we talk about a sunset or a mountain or a beach or these things that are beautiful in nature, they do speak to us something of God. But for men, there is nothing like the beauty of woman that speaks of the mystery of God's beauty and gift, the gift of self. She literally is a touch point for the man to the mystery of God and his giftedness. And so I have a wholehearted amen to woman's beauty. But here's the deal. I will say this. Men can be disordered, obviously, in this need, right? So we're very attracted toward beauty, but I would say this. Men, let's just take the most disordered guy or a disordered guy who just wants a woman's beauty. The truth of the matter is that we're actually repulsed by a narcissistic, rude, nagging, vain, selfish woman, no matter how beautiful she is. And the caveat here is that men who are enslaved by lust, they may want that beauty for a time, but they will not want her long. They don't want the self-absorbed woman long term, because they know that that's not what they really want. So the external beauty here leads to the internal person. And that's why I believe that because God created us to be visual, he's leading us men into the internal mystery of woman. But I think at some point what we need to do in this conversation, though, is speak to women about like when they don't try, because I think that as much as women express contempt for their husbands because they desire their wives to be beautiful specifically for him, because there's this dynamic where women will dress up and adorn themselves and be beautiful to go out with their friends. And a friend of mine said to his wife when she was going out with one of her friends, "Hey, do you think you could look like that for me sometime?" I mean, so when a woman doesn't put forth real effort to be beautiful for her husband intentionally, if she's not trying, that's what I'm saying, it sends the message to him, she doesn't care for me. She doesn't respect me. So I think that women often, it's said, this is very important. And I read this in the book, there's statistical research to back this up, but men often gauge other men's wives or other men by the effort that their wives put forth to look beautiful for their husbands. And this is a reality. There's a rating game here. Not that that justifies it, but I'm just saying when a woman expects a husband not to look elsewhere, but often refuses to give them a reason to look back upon the wife, that's where the problems start. And I'm not saying she has to be a model. She doesn't have to have that airbrush look or anything like that. All she has to do is put forth a little bit of effort. And we can get into that in a minute. So I want to make another statement here. What I just said could come off as crass or harsh, but the reality is that men in their heart, they desire this beauty. And when their wives are not putting forth a little bit of effort in this area, it crushes them.
Yeah. Well, and this is a great conversation because it's so often overlooked. And I want to emphasize too, beauty exists on like a spectrum, right? Where there is kind of this like carnal attraction, which can be very low and like very disordered, right? Where it's just about like, I want pleasure. You are the best vehicle for that. So let's engage in, sexual activity or whatever. Like that's just kind of like the lowest form of attraction. But then like the highest form of attraction goes all the way up to like the purest form of eros. And if you guys want like a beautiful meditation on this, read Pope Benedict's encyclical on beauty. And he has an incredible reflection on the different kinds of love. It's Deus Caritas Est. That's the encyclical where he talks about this. We talk about the different kinds of love and how like eros or erotic attraction often like has been conflated with our society with just like the lowest form of sexuality. But he's saying it's actually like not that case at all. He kind of uses this like descending love, ascending love. Like it's really beautiful. So I would encourage everybody to read that. But the point being that like not all physical attraction has to be rooted in sexual attraction, although there is a component of that. But erotic attraction can take many forms. Okay, so like I went to an art gallery recently, and they had this giant painting of a nude woman. It was Alphonse de Bouguereau, who's like a late 1800s painter. Incredible painter. Look him up. Incredible painter. But he had this giant nude woman, but it was like incredibly like attractive, but not in like a sexual way. Like it wasn't like, oh, I just want to have sex with her. Like, no, it was like, wow, that is a beautiful form right there. Like, and I think that's what Devin and John are getting at, is that like you can be attracted to something in a non-sexual way. Like I find a sunset beautiful, but I don't want to like go have sex with it. Like it just, that's not the same kind of attraction.
Right.
And so I just want to say like, I have met ladies who are, past their prime physically, and all that, but they just have like this winsome beauty about them that just kind of radiates out, even though they've got some wrinkles, some gray hair, and it's not sexual in any way. It's just like, wow, that is a beautiful woman. Like she's truly feminine. She just has like this grace and loveliness about her, even though she's not like, going to be on TikTok doing dances or anything like that. Like it's not that kind of attraction. It's just something deeper. And I would encourage women, like when we're talking about this, don't be threatened. Like, well, I gained a few pounds since my wedding,
agreed.
Or I've got some wrinkles forming, or my hair is going gray. My husband's not going to want me anymore. Like that's not what we're talking about here. And there's a deeper level of attraction you can cultivate where essentially you say, like, just like clothes they don't make the man, but they do reflect the man. And I
Mm.
think what your outward appearance can do, it doesn't have to be caked in makeup or anything like that, but like you
Right.
can reflect in your outward appearance to your husband that I find you desirable enough that I want you to, and I want you to desire me. And because I think deep down, every woman wants to be beautiful. They want someone to say, "Ah, yes, I want her." You know, like they want to be seen. My daughters come down the stairs in their sparkly dresses or their sparkly shoes, and they can't wait for me to say,
That's right.
"Oh, you're so beautiful." You know, and like every woman desires that. And so try to cultivate that kind of attraction with your husband, where it's like, yes, her, she's the one for me, you know, and like he will be delighted, and you will also be delighted by his attention and affection. And I think there's so much more that can be said, but I'll stop talking
Yeah,
now.
no.
But those are some things that come to mind as we discuss this topic.
Yeah, I really like that, Sam, and I want to take those a couple of your comments, and I want to kind of flip them for men, and how they are relating to the women in their lives. And that last one of affirmation is never not well received. And by that I mean, if you are not affirming your wife when she is looking beautiful, when she is putting in an effort, you might be creating your own downward spiral within this situation. And it's they've women always want to be seen in their beauty, and and I think that that's so important for us to remember. And I've heard stories about women getting together, putting themselves together to go on a date, and their husband not saying anything, but then some other woman at a restaurant saying something to them, and the man just realizing how he failed, or just oblivious to the fact that women need that. And so that's so important for us. Yeah. Devin, you're
It's
laughing.
even worse when it's a man who comes up and says, wow,
I know, right? And then you get what you deserve. And so, but another one of the points that you mentioned, was that love is expansive. And I like that comment. And I do, so that we're not putting women on this pedestal that, time and life, and my wife has been pregnant 12 times, thanks be to God. And we have a great family, and I find her all the more beautiful because the struggles and the tension, beauty grows, love grows, and can see all those things. So that's not what we're doing. We're not trying to put some sort of poster image of what a woman looked like on our honeymoon, and that has to be maintained, because virtue is in the means, and both women and men can go back to that failing, right, where they have to uphold an ideal or an image of themselves that is not practical and not realistic because of age and because of life circumstances. And so that's not what we're saying either. And I think that's really important, that we don't go to both sides, and that we remember that love is that extreme. And then the final thing that I just kind of want to say on this, for men who maybe find yourself in a situation where it's been a long time since you've affirmed your wife, or your wife has put herself together, is, as silly as this sounds, are you budgeting for that, right? Because I can't, the amount of times that my wife has wanted to do her hair, right? Go get her hair, but it costs a lot more for women to do their hair, but it's something my wife likes to do. Are we budgeting for that so that she can do the things that help her feel beautiful, that she can do those things which help her feel, or is it just a constant, no, we can't do, no, we can't do, no, we can't do, and you're not affirming that aspect of life to help them get there? And everything from new clothes on occasion, or, I know some women love manicures, right? Manicures don't mean anything to me, and fortunately not so much for my wife either, but there are some women who just find that beauty, and if that beauty that they're able to find in that, then they want it to, they want to do more with it, and they become more. And again, it's a win-win. So anyways, I just, pass it over to you, Devin, with those thoughts as we're going into
I
that.
thought that was very good, that they become more. You tell a woman that she's beautiful, she will want to continue to be beautiful. She will aspire to uphold and express that beauty. You tell your wife that she's beautiful, she will want to be beautiful for you. And I think what we're talking about here, one caveat is do not tell your wife that she's gaining weight. Do not tell your wife that she's getting fat. Do not tell your wife that those jeans look tight on her, because guess what? Big news here. She already knows it. She already feels
That's
it.
right.
She's already pained by it. And she
Yeah.
doesn't need you to make the pain even more severe. But what she does need you to do is to find that beauty again, to draw that beauty out. And there's also a chemical reality to this. The more that a couple has, not the more, but consistently having intercourse with one another, as they age, they are still bonded and they see one another almost as though they saw each other when they
Mhm.
first were dating. And the reason is because those chemicals that are released in the brain during intercourse or at the sight of the naked body for the man when he sees a woman, that bonds the man to the woman. And so what are we really looking for here is I don't believe that most of us men, especially Catholic gentlemen, are so shallow that we want the fake airbrushed model. No
Amen.
way. We just want, what we want? Like, I know what I want. I want you. That's what I say to my wife. I want you. I don't want a fake model. I don't want this or that. I want you. And here's what we want, I think, as husbands. Just just take care of yourself, eat right, exercise a little bit, just put forth a little effort. When you're going out, just dress up a little bit and just put forth a little effort to just try to look beautiful before us, because what that says is, I want to be my best for him. And you know what? For us, that really is enough. And that communicates respect, which is our love language. And it just says, look, and I was on an interview on a Catholic radio, relevant radio, and the host was interviewing me. She said, gosh, that just doesn't sound like that much. And I'm like, yeah, I hope not. Because what we're not asking for is, hey, go out and hit the gym for hours and make sure you got that incredible teen body. No, we're realists. And you know what? We're not actually studs ourselves.
Right.
We're aging too. So there's a
Yeah.
reality to this. But the point is that I think when there's effort on both sides, that goes a long ways.
Right. Like when a man can say to a woman, I want you, no one else, I want you.
Yes.
But when the woman strives to make herself attractive for a man, what she's saying, non-verbally, of course, is, I want you. Like, I
Yes.
want you too. Like, I want to be that woman that is desirable to you because you matter to me. And like, it's like this beautiful mutuality where it's like the man says over and over, I choose you. Out of all the billions of women on earth, you're the one for me. And if with a woman, by making herself attractive for the man, is saying to the man, out of all the billions of men on earth, I want you to find me desirable. And if that can happen, you're gonna have a great marriage. Like you're just gonna desire each other, and cultivating that, there's nothing wrong with that. Like when I get dressed in the morning, I want to look nice. Like I want my wife to want me. I don't want like some woman at the store to compliment me. Like I want her to say, "You look good today." And
Amen.
my wife is great. She often does, but that feels good. That makes me feel good as a man. But likewise, like when she puts on a dress that she feels makes her feel beautiful, and then I come in like, oh, like you look amazing. Like that just like she just lights up, and if that can happen on both sides, things are gonna go well.
So yeah, I think the key here is for women, when you are intentionally and specifically striving to be beautiful for your husband, not just in general, not for your friends, but specifically and intentionally for your husband or your fiance or whoever. And when the man specifically and intentionally directs her, points that out, says, I see your beauty. That intentionality is everything, because that builds trust. Trust is the foundation of a relationship. And again, the thing that hammers against it is when we don't see the beauty and acknowledge it, or we undermine it by saying, wow, that's a nice dress, but it looks a little tight on you. Boom, bad move, bad move. And when she's dressing nicely and getting all made up for her friends, but then you guys are going out and she's basically got on just what she wore all day, and she's not even, trying, that damages that trust. That undermines the trust.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, don't avoid any of those yes, but situations in affirming your wife. I completely agree. I also want to just say, yeah, from personal experience, I remember thinking for years, many years, because this is, I'm dense and stuff, but just many years, I just would like look at my wife and say, I just wish you could see yourself the way I see you. Like, I mean, it wasn't that shallow men compare their wives to other women, right? And if that's you, you need to turn to prayer, and you gotta work on custody eyes and and fasting and those sort of things. But real men, real Catholic men are looking at their wives and looking at that beauty and wanting to grow in holiness and virtue and love with that woman. And what I go in full circle about the denseness of me, that it was years into our marriage where I started kind of taking this in a way upon myself as, well, it's my job to affirm her beauty so that she can, because she is shaking off years and years and years of body images and body shaming and airbrushed images and comparison in the dating world and all of those baggage and burdens that she has put upon her, and that it is my job to redirect that authentically in love. And that's been my call. But it took me years to realize that, like, she's not going to just see herself like I see her, that I have to work to help her appreciate and love herself the way I see her and the way I love her. And in that, in that dance and in that love, it's just it's what the fullness of marriage can be. So
it's healing.
Yeah, it's healing.
It's healing because the culture assaults women. The culture attacks their body image. The culture says you're not enough. You've got to be more. And when a wife has a husband who says you are enough, you're more than I could have ever imagined, you are beautiful, that heals her. And he is actually applying Christ's healing balm to his bride as Christ does to the church. And yes, he has to back it up, but it is verbal as well as real. So she also is watching to see if he's looking at other women. He's saying, if you're saying that and you're looking at other women, that isn't going to work, right? Yeah. But here's the key. Men, if you're struggling to find your wife beautiful, let's say her body is taking some hits over the years because of pregnancy and stress and things like that. The one thing I would commend you to do is to begin in your prayer time to, in a sense, examine the reasons why you are thankful for her, and then give thanks to God for her. And out of that thanksgiving, there is this appreciation that builds for her. And that appreciation then allows you to see her anew. And then you'll be able to express it. And the more you express it, the more you will believe it. And as one woman said, she spoke to a bunch of our Father St. Joseph men. She says, fake it till you make it. And I guess, at some level, sure. But I think more importantly, be grateful for her, express your gratitude for it, thank God for it, find the many ways that you are thankful for, and then begin to express that to her. And that her beauty will begin to radiate to you. And you will be able to not only profess it, but believe it. And then by believing it, you'll profess it all the more. And professing it all the more, you'll believe it all the more.
Yeah, I think that's great. I really appreciate it. So I think it's a good time to move on to our third and final point of what women don't understand about men. And I think for men that this is really important to realize about yourself if this is you. And so that is why men, or why he will focus on work instead of his family. And we find ourselves, you have probably found yourself in there, and we kind of alluded to it with control, like, but removing yourself from your family and removing yourself from that, honestly, time and commitment and work that it takes within family. We remove ourselves on that and we focus ourselves on work. And so I wanted to start with you, Devin, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this issue, again, as it relates to men and their outward actions.
Yeah. So why do we choose work over family? And I think that we do need to get inside the male brain on this one big time, because men, I don't know about you guys, John, Sam, but I could literally work in the yard for 12 hours, on my project and not talk to a soul and be perfectly content as long as I finish that project and it goes well, or I get somewhere with it. Whereas I don't think my wife would enjoy working on something for 12 hours by herself, you know? And I think that that testifies to how we operate as men. We're so focused on the goal. We're so focused on competition and the finishing of something. We want to win. This is inside of each and every one of us as men. We're made for competition. We're made for finishing. We're made for doing the task. And so we love problem solving, or at least we love it when it goes well. But relationships are very hard for us. At least they are for me. And I think because work has a finite end, a project has a finite end, it has a conclusion, but relationships don't. Okay. And so, you know, we can see this just even in Joseph and Mary. Mary says, "Let it be done to me according to thy word." So it's a relational aspect, very receptive. Joseph rises and he does what the angel commands him to do. There's a let it be done, and he does. And so I think for a man in relationships truly are the most difficult thing for any of us, but they are never complete. The circuit is always open. So when we don't have that sense of accomplishment, achievement, or satisfaction in our marriage or in our children. And I think at home, like where lots of men suffer with insecurity, we said this earlier, but where we feel like the biggest losers, even if we're winning big at work, is on the home front. Why? Because our family knows us better than anyone else. And our family isn't going to be giving us the attaboys and the congratulations and the well dones. And so that's one of the reasons why we appeal to work, is because we finish that job or we do it right or whatever, and we get the attaboys, we get the accolades, we get the honors. At home, we're not getting that, because at home, our wives and our children are wanting something a little bit different. They actually want us. They want our face. They want our voice. They want our time. They want our love. They don't want us to necessarily do something, which we're so good at. They want us. Yeah. So I think that that's the challenge, is that relationships are probably, at least for men, at least for me, is one of the most difficult things to do. And it's never done. Whereas if things get tough in my relationships, I want to go into my work and bury myself there and feel some sense of satisfaction and accomplishment and get the attaboy from someone else.
Oh, Sam, you're muted.
Sorry. A really simple image to capture this difference, I think, that Devin's talking about, is like a pyramid and a circle. Women are like a circle. There's like no beginning or no end, to like that relationship, like Devin's saying. But the other thing to notice about it is there's no point, in the sense that like a pyramid has a point. Yeah. Actually has 3 points. Yeah. But the point being, like, there's this hierarchical drive to like climb the ladder, get to the top of the pyramid. Maybe that looks different for everybody. Maybe not everyone's a CEO or whatever, but at least in your field, like, you want to get to the top. Like, you want to reach the point. And like, men feel secure in that, because again, like, there's that sense of purpose, there's that sense of completion, there's that sense of competition. But in relationship, it's just round and round and round infinitely without end. And like, yeah, men don't know what to do with that. And so the safest thing feels like withdraw. Just don't engage. Just stay in my comfort zone here. And honestly, like, think about work. Like, if you're working, let's say I'm just making things up here, but let's say you're working 10-hour days. And like you're saying, you're getting those attaboys, like your boss is like, man, this guy's a hard worker. I'm going to give him a raise. I'm going to give him an award. And like, oh, like, man, just love that. Like, so not only are you avoiding the messiness of relationships, you're also reaping tangible rewards in the form of bonuses, raises, like attention from your superiors. Like, it just feels so good. It's like the perfect setup for a man to like, this just feels so much better than going home and like, my wife's upset with me, my kids are crying, they want attention, and like, oh, I just feel this is like totally overwhelming. I'm completely out of my element. I'm out of here, and sure. Like, that's that withdrawal mechanism. It can be really powerful.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great. Yeah, Devin.
I was just going to say, just a word to wives, if wives are listening or ladies are listening. One of the factors that I think is that leads to the consequence of what you're talking about, Sam. This flight kind of withdrawal where I dive into my work and I avoid my family is the nagging wife, you know? And I no offense, ladies, but it's the nagging wife, the critical wife, because what happens, see the juxtaposition, he goes to work, he's affirmed, he receives accolades, or at least he knows internally I accomplished something. Whereas at home, it's the opposite, right? He's getting dinged. And so just a word is like, if you can't compliment him, if you can't find anything good that he's doing, just at least refrain from commenting negatively. And that at least can help him to rest a little bit easier on the home front and maybe want to be there a little bit more. But I also just think that when a wife compliments her husband, when she sees him again for the little things that he does, you know, I mean, I don't know about you, but like if my wife makes dinner, I thank her for it, you know? And I wonder how many wives thank their husbands for bringing home the bacon,
Yeah.
you know? It's just kind of like one of these things. It's expected. I mean, I wonder if we did a survey and asked, you know, men, how many times does your wife thank you in the last 3 weeks for going to work and duking it out and bringing home the income? I think we'd find not very often. But yet that's a big part of what we do. And so I think that, yes, we have a tendency to avoid our family and the relationships and dive into our work. But at the same time, please just give us a little reason why we would want to, you know, I mean, we're supposed to remain on the home front. We need to sacrifice on the home front, but make it a little enjoyable. You know, I mean, you know, let us rejoice in what we're doing for the family, you know, a little bit. See us again, please. You know?
Yeah. That's so fun. I appreciate that. Some great Bambi wisdom, right? If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And and so and
Right.
no, but I really appreciate that. I think that's great. A lot of things have come into mind, but one of them, which we brought up in the past, is that your occupation is at the service of your vocation, and not the other way around. And men, that's our calling. But at the same time, you know, saints are made in the home, and it's not because it's easy or bed of roses. It's because it takes time, it takes commitment, it takes effort. And that, frankly, it can be exhausting for men that have already had a long day at work. You know, so I think we're kind of balancing, you know, this situation here where men naturally see the difficulty and maybe the unknown and the lack of control that they have, you know, within their family structure and unit. You know, just because you're dealing with kids of all ages and kids of all mental abilities and developmental abilities. But at the same time, when we look at work, it often is something that we can control. And frankly, I think that we have to state this, is that women should understand that men have 25% less connective tissue between their right and left brain, which is why we can focus more, which is why when you know, when we were in the hunters and gatherers, the men went out to hunt because they could stay focused and not have to think about, you know, everything else, which is why on the battlefield, it's so true to have men on the battlefield and not women, because men can compartmentalize and can remove what else is happening to them without having some sort of emotional reaction to it. And it literally is a biological reality of our lives. But now when you put that to work, that's why when you see like Thomas Edison and you read the biography of him, or Benjamin Franklin, you just see these guys that just worked like 12-hour days. And I'm not justifying that length of work, but they can do it because of how they were biologically made. And Thomas Edison, even as much as, if you know, he used to hold these metal balls in his hands so that when he would fall asleep, right, and they would hit the tin below him, and he could wake up instantly and think about, you know, what it was that last thought as he was, you know, discerning these things. And I mean, just that constant ability, and that, hey, we're getting affirmed in that. We can control that, and we can move forward in that. And that's just got that natural desire. So being aware of this in the lives of the men in your life is important, because then you can help understand them. And then, as Devin was saying, you know, do things to support and complement them. Again, we're here as Catholic gentlemen. We're not here looking for excuses. We are looking at things rightly and hoping that the women in our lives can see that as well, so that we in union can grow and forward in life. And so I think that's such a great point.
Yeah, and I want to come back to this idea of like the brain differences too, because the left brain and right brain they both can process emotions and things like that. But the left brain is very utilitarian. It's very concerned with putting the world to use.
Yes.
And this is why men are such great builders. You
Yeah.
know, like they can see like the vision and they can execute it, and like, but with single-minded focus. It's like a one-lane highway, you know, where it's like I see what's right in front of me and I work at it until it's done, you know. And it's like that left brain sees the world in terms of how can I put this to use? What can I build? What can I? And it's very much concerned with like grasping, controlling, using. And of course, there can be downsides to that, but by and large, like this is why men build huge companies. This is why men build huge buildings. Like it's that narrow beam attention. And then women, on the other hand, are much more. They're like a multi-lane highway. They can be thinking about what's for dinner. What have the kids done their homework? You know, like what's the schedule for this week? And they can do it all simultaneously. And they get frustrated with men because it's like we got that laser tunnel vision. And a beautiful, an interesting way of illustrating this is they've done research on animals. And like if you, I don't know how many of you've seen a chicken eating, but it's really fascinating. They like tip their heads sideways. They have one eye on one side, one on the other, but they're like connected to those hemispheres of the brain. And that one eye that's focused on the seeds on the ground, it needs that narrow beam attention to get the seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't, it's going to starve to death. So it needs that to survive. But likewise, the other eye, what's the other eye doing? It's got this broad beam attention. It's looking out for danger. It's seeing the whole picture. It's seeing, you know, it's looking for those hawks or like those snakes or, you know, those scary humans or whatever. And it's like, and this is why women are more prone to anxiety, by the way, because this is the way their brain works. They can see multiple things at once. Whereas men are just like right in front of them and just like, as long as there's no danger right in front of me, I'm fine, you know, and just keep plowing ahead. But it's just an interesting illustration that demonstrates the difference between the way men and women see the world. Like men are just, where's that seed? I gotta get it because you got a family to feed, you know, and like the woman's like, oh, but there's like 50 other things out here that we got to be watching out for danger. And like, and yeah, so all that to say, like both men and women are capable of using both halves of their brain, but like it's just a little more work for men to have that more expansive, holistic vision. And it's harder for women to have narrow beam attention. Like I swear, like my wife and like all the women I know all have ADHD because it's like they're just they're juggling so many plates at once.
Yeah.
And they don't understand why we can't do that too, you know. So anyway,
yeah, men are like a rural country road. Women are like the downtown loop in Chicago. You know, it's just like wow, you know. But I do think that on a practical note, one thing that can help us as men, because we are one lane kind of guys, you know, we have that drive toward the goal, the destination, is if you're going to be with your wife, you know, like compartmentalize that time, if you will, you know, get that weekly date night, get that time at the end of the night where it's just you and her and you're decompressing and you're listening to her, and just shut off the phone and just make sure you're giving her that space and that time. And likewise, on the flip side, this is why he doesn't like being interrupted when he's changing the oil or when he's trying to do the electrical work, you know, or whatever, is because he's focused and, you know, you're wanting to talk about something. And, you know, so just kind of give him that space temporarily. And the both of you agree that you're going to have that time together to talk things out. I think it's wonderful. Like sometimes, you know, I will be in the middle of my workday and my wife will call or want to talk about something. I'm like, hey, can we just talk about this tonight at date night? Or can we talk about this, you know, before bed or whatever? And at least, and then that gives us something to look forward to. And I know I can give her my undivided attention without pretending to listen or pretending to get through it, which is actually a disservice to her and a lack of respect to her.
Yeah, thank you, Devin. I appreciate you saying that. My wife and I have something that we started very early on in our marriage. When I'm in my zone or something like that, I just let her know that, right? Because if she does want to talk, or she can see that it's starting to frustrate me because I'm looking to complete this task or something like that, I'll just let her know that, you know, I'm I'm in my zone.
I'm in the zone.
And, yeah, I'm in the zone. I'm in my cave. You don't want to come in. But to your point, it is, and it's worked well because then I'm going to give her my undivided attention later. I will definitely, have that time to dialogue about it. But that kind of sudden interruption, when you are focused like that, can be jarring. And so anyways, just ways like that to work through it with your wife. So. Men, do you find yourself addicted to social media and attached to your phone? Do you find yourself struggling with an addiction to sugar or alcohol and something that you've been trying to stop, but you just can't? Maybe it's not an everyday thing, but it's frequently. And at the same time, you find yourself struggling in prayer and not really knowing the right way to go. We have all found ourselves in these situations. And today, our sponsor for this episode would like to provide you a solution.
The solution is prayer, fasting, and brotherhood. 3 traditional pillars that have accompanied holy men and women throughout the church's life. This practice of asceticism. And really it comes down to freeing ourselves from slavery. This is where the idea of Exodus 90 comes from. The Jewish people were enslaved by the Egyptians, and they had to exodus. They had to leave that land of slavery in order to enter the land of freedom and blessing. And that's what we're called to as Catholic men as well. So if you find yourself enslaved, you find yourself struggling, it's time to embrace prayer, fasting, and asceticism. And you might say, how does that work? Well, Exodus 90 gives you a roadmap, a 90-day roadmap of reflections, practices, and spiritual disciplines that help you find freedom in your spiritual life.
So men, this year, Exodus 90 starts on January 1st. How perfect is that? That's 90 days before Easter. So you can start this year as a new man, a new you, and have the guide and the tools to do so. So I'd encourage you to head over to startmyexodus.com. I'm going to put that link in the show note and sign up today. God bless. No, wonderful. I want to make sure that we have time to get to this listener's question today. So we do have a great question from listener. If you are a listener and you're interested in us answering one of your questions on the show, send it to us at podcast@catholicgentleman.com. We'd love to hear it from you. And we will play it on this episode, or on the episode that we're answering it on. If you record it via audio on your phone and send us the audio recording, we'll actually use your voice and play that. And so today we have a really great question that I am is something that definitely strikes all men, and it's about that selfishness and its relationship to your wife. So let's listen to it now.
I struggle with selfishness. I feel like I'm constantly talking about my work issues with my wife. How do I overcome selfishness in my conversation with her?
Yeah, and so we're talking about selfishness and its conversations with your wife. And I immediately think of a couple ways that this can appear. And one is waiting for her to stop talking so that you can talk, right? That's a dangerous place to be in. And it's something that we've all found ourselves in. You need to sit with that for a while and reflect on that, with yourself and in prayer. I'd encourage you to do that. But one of the other things that you just mentioned was specifically as it relates to, work issues. And Devin said it a couple times. I actually think he might have said it on this episode, is that your wife can't solve your problems. And I'm going to say that you have an obligation to protect your wife physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And knowing that she can't fix your problems, dumping on her is a very toxic place. And frankly, I found myself in it for many years. And it was my wife actually not too long ago this year who reminded me and was just like, I can't solve these things. And it's becoming kind of like almost like a gossip column of just my frustrations about my work. And I'll say that humbly, I was struck and I was grateful that she reminded me of that. And then I practically have turned it to prayer for many months now, daily as a reminder. And I actually do that because you're looking for that practical guidance, not just what you already understand. But before I leave at work, as many days as I can, and I would say 3 or 4, upwards to 5 times a week, I say a prayer before leaving when I put things down that I might not burden my family with the struggles and difficulties of my day. And then I also have my talking points. So when my wife does ask me how my day goes, I was just like, oh, it was a busy day, had a lot of good meetings, or something along those lines. and we don't dive into them. And don't get me wrong, I still fail at this. And sometimes I'll accidentally let something slip, or I will think of maybe there's an intelligent way that I can bring this up to my wife that doesn't put a burden on her. Just never works. And so, I'd encourage you to put those, let's call them the border, those obstacles, if you will, or those practices in place to avoid that with your wife.
Yeah, and I'll just add to we do want to share things that are on our mind and heart with people that are close to us, including our wife. The question you have to ask yourself, though, is there's a little acronym we use sometimes, like wait, like why am I saying this? Because is it to share what's on my mind and heart, things that I'm like preoccupied with, and I just want to share it with her because she's important to me. Or is it just like, I gotta vent, I gotta complain? She just happens to be the closest person to me, and like she's the one that gets the brunt of it. And like, is it just completely unproductive whining and complaining? Or is it something that's really important to you? The other thing I would ask is, if you've got ongoing problems at work, maybe there's something that needs to be addressed with your supervisors at work or your managers, something that you can take action towards resolving rather than just complaining about it. Because that isn't fair to your wife. But like, if there is something you can do, then do it. But if there isn't, then the other thing you can do is get another guy friend to, like we talked about earlier in the episode, like hang out, talk about it, but strive for, solutions rather than just, again, complaining. And finally, you can see a therapist, and like they can actually help you work through those things and see things from a neutral perspective. That is an option. Guys can do that. Yeah. I have a lot of male clients, so I would just say that, like, really ask yourself, why am I saying this? Is it because this is really close to my heart, really weighing on me, and I want someone I care about in my life to share that with her, or is it just you happen to be the only one in the room and you're going to get it, like that's completely unhelpful.
Yeah, agreed.
Perfect. I think that's good. Was the acronym WAIT or WASTE?
Yeah, it's kind of a cheating acronym because it drops the S.
If it's what is it? What am I saying?
Why am I saying this?
Why am I saying this? Waste. Well, I mean, if you're saying it for the wrong reasons, it is a waste. So
there you go.
I like that though. I do think too, there is something about, if we look at how the Lord deals with us in prayer, he allows us to speak. He allows us to vent. He gives us that space. And I think that when we're, in a relationship with our wives, we need to give our wives that space to be able to talk to us. And if we're constantly talking about what's going on in our life, whether it's achievements or failures or whatever, and we're dominating the conversation, that doesn't make for a good relationship. So I think that it's good for all of us to check. And this is like you're saying, in a sense, Sam, is am I saying enough or am I saying too much? Am I contributing to the conversation, or am I just withdrawing, or am I just monopolizing the conversation and just burdening her? And so I think that there's a balance there, and it's hard, it's difficult, but I think that's important.
Yeah, agreed. And I actually really like just a couple things came to mind listening to both of you guys talk. And one of them is the practice of gratefulness. I have found that when you practice gratefulness frequently throughout the day, even for the struggles and difficulties that you're facing, as opportunities to rise to the occasion, to love as God is calling you to love, to experience life the way that he is requiring you to through his permissive will, that it is a beautiful thing and it can transform your outlook on lives. And that is a brain pathway that we need to work on and develop. And I think that is such a good point. The other thing is that I wanted to talk about, because of Devin just mentioned it, I've gotten better, but it's something I've been working on for the last couple of years, is talking to our lady about these things. If you don't know how to solve something, if you don't know how to deal with a person, with a client or a coworker or something like that, bring it up to her. talk to our lady. Just, I don't know how to handle this, right? And they really bother me, and it's getting inside, and I just don't know what to do. And bring that up in prayer. Bring that up into the body of the church triumphant, and especially with our Blessed Mother, who loves you and is the mediatrix of graces that can then just pour forth those upon you to help you view this rightly in uniformity with God's will. And those are all wonderful things. So,
Beautiful. Patience
really.
obtains all things. Patience obtains all things. Rashness will destroy even the best of relationships.
Amen. Such good things. And we need to come out with a little quote book of the random things that come out in these episodes. So the final part of this episode, putting on the new man. If you didn't know this, every single week we come out with a challenge to men. We call it putting on the new man because after all, that's what we're required to do. We actively live the good life. We actively pursue or strive towards a better life in virtue, one that we can be proud of and that we can, show our love of God to ourselves, to Him, of course, and to our neighbor. And so within that, putting on the new man, this week we're going to actually have a similar one as last week because these two episodes are just so important. And so, Devin, you want to remind us what the challenge is for this week?
If I'm remembering correctly, the big challenge here is to share this episode with a woman in your life, whether it's your wife or your fiance, or maybe it's just a female friend, and actually ask her to listen and then follow back up with a discussion and say, hey, what'd you think of this? I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. But very importantly, with your wife, listen. Do not jump to conclusions. Do not cut her off. Do not be combative. Just listen, go back, take it to prayer, and then maybe circle back and talk in a very, I guess, charitable way. But the point here is share this episode because women need to know what's going on in the male brain. Because frankly, we don't understand women and women don't understand us. And so whatever we can do to bridge that gap is miraculous.
Amen. No, it's so good. And you reminded me of Dr. Greg Bottaro, who was on one of our earlier episodes. I think last year, I can't remember exactly what episode it is, but I remember him talking about you want to solve your wife's problems. And he was like, start by listening, then repeat what you heard, then validate her, and you solve her problems. And he was just like, that's it. And so it's so good to have that conversation. So good to listen. Well, it is such a blessing to me to speak to you men each week, Devin and Sam. I'm just so grateful for your presence here. And as we end each of our episodes,
be a man, be a saint.